Okay.
Muy bien, espero que hayan prestado atención y que no lo necesitemos. Bienvenidos al día 2 de esta sexta conferencia de estadística. Y ayer fue un día muy productivo y espero que el café de mañana haya sido lo suficientemente fuerte porque vamos a empezar con un tema muy fuerte, la inteligencia artificial. La inteligencia artificial, una herramienta potente, y lo es. Personalmente, cuando probé el chat GPT, fue como tener mi primer celular o abrir mi primer correo electrónico o primera búsqueda por Google. Mi sensación
Novelty to necessity, and for central banks and public
al menos para los bancos centrales y las instituciones públicas, la inteligencia artificial tiene gran potencial, un análisis más rápido, comunicaciones, operaciones más eficientes, pero también reales riesgos. El riesgo de transparencia, preocupaciones de seguridad. Entonces, en este minuto, la gobernanza está poniéndose detrás de esto. Las cosas, la tecnología se mueve rápido, pero las reglas no. ¿Qué deberíamos hacer? ¿Avanzar de todos modos o deberíamos quedarnos quietos y seguros? En el Banco Central de Chile hemos visto de cómo la inteligencia artificial se esté utilizando en el banco y la cosa se mueve. Hemos visto proyectos pilotos en datos, investigación, comunicaciones, adopción plena aún no, pero ahí estamos llegando. ¿Qué necesitamos? Herramientas con reglas y habilidades más fuertes. Por eso estamos aquí. Van a oír de parte de 3 oradores que conocen bien este campo y nos ayudarán a separar el progreso real del hype. Y una nota para los oradores. Tenemos 82 láminas de hoy. Sí, las conté, cada una. Entonces, comencemos la sesión con un reloj suizo. Tenemos varias personas.
right in front of you that will be signaling you when you are getting to the end. So let's begin. Our first speaker is Giuseppe Bruno. He's head of division in the Economics and Statistics Department at the Bank of Italy, with a background in computational economics, big data, and intensive in other tools intensive in IT. He leads a team using AI in real-world work, like summarizing documents, automating tasks, coding, compliance, translation. He's also worked on big data and quantum computing. And today he'll talk about how public institutions can use generative AI in a safe and practical way. And he'll also cover techniques to play it safe, like retrieval augmented generation, for short, RAG, and the cost, both financial and environmental, that come with these models. Giuseppe, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And even if I had this strict information about time, I would like to start thanking, first of all, the Bank of Chile, and then let me, of course, thank also people behind an institution, like Gloria, like Patricia, and all the other people who helped me in arranging the presentation and preparing the visit here in Chile. So that's to begin with. So here, let's move to the topic that we want to discuss today. First of all, we will make this trip, this journey on this generative AI, particularly, and trying to harness the benefits of generative AI for public institutions, considering advantages and risk. Here we have really some motivation, and I will describe why we have this buzz about the word generative AI. What we have done at the Bank of Italy over the last, I would say, 18 months, I will describe some application, question and answering, and other discussion with the central bank's documents, and also we'll have some concluding remarks. Here, the important things that I want to stress is the value of interdisciplinarity. I remember that yesterday this word was mentioned by I think by your governor, and so I think I'm on the right track. And so some of the reason why we have started following these activities. Now different central banks in many different fora are discussing the possible role of generative AI. We have a platform, hardware platform, that allows to take advantage of this software, and we realize that these platforms needs special hardware equipment in order to answer in a reasonable time. Otherwise, working with the standard computer, you would wait minutes to have a simple answer. We have a bunch of recent progress from the end of 23 and also last year, where we had this ChatGPT search, which allows the engine to go beyond its knowledge that he has learned by the standard training, also going to the web and collecting new information. And recently we have also the release of the third version of Gemma on the public. So we have many questions to answer, and this is already a big problem. So here, right here, we have some very simple definition that I will skim over, just the possibility to have machines that are able to replace in some activity the human reasoning and the human activity. In particular, we have this very old test which was devised by Alan Turing in the 50s, just after the Second World War, where he was thinking of the possibility to have machines that were able to replicate, to answer like a human being. And so his test was really whether a man is able to discriminate the answer from a human being and the other from a machine. We had this kind of test ran in judging the summary of the economic bulletin and collecting mixed results, so that some people are happier with the answer from the machine, others are happier with the answer from the person, from summary from the person. And there is some sort of age gap, so that the young people prefer answer from the machine. And of course, it is important to mention that during last year we had a big increase in the LLM, in this machine. So we see this colored segments, colored rectangle that goes more to the right, and here at the end we have the human. So we see that from the beginning of with the ELISA model, we have all these models, GPT 3.5 and 4, which have been able to cross this 50% line in accuracy. And so we have from the use of these things, we can have good and bad fruits. Bad fruits are coming from toxic language or bad suggestion, for example, how to build a bomb, or to produce something that can harm the human mankind. We have also some regulation. At the beginning, the chair was discussing about how can we follow this progress, whether we have to regulate or we have to develop more technological feature. I would say that in Europe we tend to regulate maybe too much. In US they are different, so they go maybe because they have this all this startup that becomes a giant like OpenAI that didn't exist 10 years ago, and so they set their rule only to protect national security. That's the most important point for the US. Here, just a very short picture on the costs that are associated with the use of an LLM. So we have to consider essentially two uses. One, when we train a model, and there we really need hours and days and weeks of electric power, while for the inference, which is the purpose that we use more, so we go more in asking questions, like on the phone I ask something about, for example, Museo Precolombino, and that's, I consume less power, but still is some energy is consumed. But of course, LLM is not really the devil if we consider, for example, the energy consumed by Bitcoin and other crypto asset things. But what are these? These LLM are simply some autoregressive models that have a huge dictionary. It's not, I mean, it's not like an autoregressive process that has infinite real numbers, but is like, for example, if we consider a multi-language, we have hundreds of thousands of words that are considered, and here we have just a picture describing what happens. So we have usually, even if in practice sometimes encoder and decoder are merged in just one tool, but anyway, we have one statement, el sol è la causa de, and then this decoder is able to pick the answer which is more likely, which has the highest likelihood to complete the statement. So essentially, mathematics, which is behind these models, is just standard maximum likelihood estimation. So here we have some of the options of the models, and here I'm talking about open source model and also private source model like ChatGPT and others. What are the platforms that we are using? At the Bank of Italy, we started distributing Microsoft Copilot, which will reach almost everybody. We have also some cloud machine which are deployed for in virtual private environment. And finally, we are also teaming together with Cinega University Consortium, which is a very big machine. We have here a picture which allows us to work with, along with other institutions. So it's not our private machine, but we can work with it. And it's one of the 10 highest computing platforms in the world. Here, a very simple description taken from a paper of 2023. And the interesting thing about this paper is that was written by 113 co-authors. That's just to mean that this word interdisciplinarity is not just heap. But we need different professional skill, different background to put forward this project. And when we want to measure this machine, and I'm sure that Fernando will also go deeper in these details, we have scaling laws that explain how these models grow when you grow the number of parameters. And here, this data scientist, Sutskever, said that if you have a very large data set, so you have a very big data set to train your model, and you have a big deep neural network, you will have success for sure. But this is true, but of course we have diminishing marginal return. So Ricardo laws and economic laws always bound us not to go much further. And so here we have this scaling laws explained, so that the loss that we have is decreasing with these powers. So we have this kind of different scaling laws. That means essentially that the bigger is the model, the more accurate is going to be the answer. In general, this is what we have. Even if now we are going also with small models, the small language models that are also useful for running a simple example. In our platform, we have used this kind of models, small models, and we have made many different examples. And here I will try to describe some of the examples very quickly, because I mean the time is really a tyrant against us. So we have used Oyama, but now we are using also VLLM and other things, other tools that allows us to use this model to build different application, different kind of application in the same vein of summarizing, of question answering with the internal documents, this kind of things. And for example, in our department, we have used this approach of following this framework. This is a very recent framework that provide some governance, I would say, to define this application with these generative AI tools. And those are things that allows us to prepare the good prompt. And here are some example. Here, I mean, for example, for translating from one programming language to another. So here I'm taking an example from Stata to R. So we developed a simple interface, and now we are testing the quality of the code which is generated by this application. And this is important when we have idea of moving from proprietary to open source solution. And also we have some other application in trying to change the tone of the speeches and the kind of economic speech that we provide in public, or we prepare for some information to the public. And now I have really to go quite fast. Here, I don't want to go into the details, but I will leave the slides, of course. The important thing is that even if we have seen a steep improvement in the behavior of this machine, they still make errors. So we cannot avoid the man-in-the-loop things. So this is very, very important to consider. And also I try to run some example for the inflation and the recovery plans after the pandemics, providing this kind of questions to open source solution, and I got a nice answer from Llama 3, which I mean this model Llama 2, this family of models have the advantage that can be brought into your house. You can give them all kinds of models because there is no leakage, because everything will stay within your premise. Of course, you don't have the same performances as ChatGPT, but still you can have good results. So here also second answer, which is a good, another simple, very simple economic problem that I've been given to the model, and I got exact reasoning on the model. Then I also try to use this tool which augment the knowledge of a machine, providing extra documents, and I tested this this model on our document. TUB is the Testo Unico Bancario, is a banking law in Italy, but also I took the freedom, I asked the permission, by the way, asked the permission to use your public Bollettino Statistico with the Notebook LM, which is a Google product which makes a RAG out of your document. So you provide the document, and then you can chat with your document, asking, for example, a summary, asking details, whether there are, for example, asymmetry between one version and the previous one, so that to make sure that you don't make bad contradiction between one edition and the following. And here is the following of the example. And also I was able, and I have to finish this work, produce a sort of a legal RAG with this Cineca machine. Why did we use the Cineca machine? Because here on the Cineca machine we have been able to run their biggest model, which is 405 billions, so 500 billion parameters, to ask about legal things with our banking system. Also, we have the possibility to work with econometric modeling, and we cannot spend time because really running out of time very pitifully. And we have a possibility to ask a difference between different kind of models. And here we have just some concluding remarks that I want to stress. The large language module have improved a lot in the last year, so in 24. We have this dual nature of the intelligence, which we have language and mathematics, essentially. Right now, LLM seems very good in language, but they are learning a lot also about mathematics. They are improving. And so it's very likely that we will be able to go in the next future with a very full completed intelligence machine also in the second part. Okay, and this completes my presentation, and I would like simply to be here for questions, and of course to remember that I also had the chance to read some of Pablo Neruda because of this invitation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Giuseppe. So our next speaker is Bruno Tissot. He heads statistics and research support at the BIS and serves as secretary of the Urban Fishing Committee. Bruno brings a global perspective on how central banks are adopting AI. He'll talk about where progress is happening and where it's getting stuck, and especially around governance, coordination, and moving from pilots to full-scale use. Bruno, please go ahead.
Yes, many thanks. So many thanks for inviting me again to this wonderful event, which is really impressive. It's really a benchmark for International Statistical Conference. I'm very impressed. As you know, so we have the IFC committee, the Irving Fisher Committee on Central Bank Statistics, representing 109 central banks currently, hosted by the BIS. Chile is very supportive because the committee is chaired by Alberto Nodo, member of the board, and also Gloria Peña is a member of the executive, so the governance body of the committee, and I'm just the secretary supporting the executive. So, especially with the support of the Central Bank of Chile, we organized a survey on AI in central banks, and we published the results a few weeks ago, and I will show you the main lessons. And again, this survey was benefited a lot from Central Bank of Chile, the input from Gloria, and also my co-author, Ricardo Villarreal. So we looked at various topics. One was AI in central banks, the impact. We had a focus on generative AI, on the governance of AI, a few discussions on IT, and some aspects looking forward. What we saw, so all is not very strange, but at least it's confirmed by the survey. So first, we see that AI is really a priority for central banks these days. The coverage of the survey was, of course, we have a lot of European countries that are very advanced in this, but quite a lot of countries in Asia and Americas also were represented. And so on the left, you see the coverage. On the right, you see that it's quite either high or quite normal in strategic planning to look at the impact of AI and machine learning. And what we saw is that, yes, this issue obviously is discussed quite intensively in central banks. On the left, you see that at least there are 1/3 that discuss extensively AI, and moderately more than half. On the right, you see that the budget allocated to AI projects was relatively limited, is increasing, and is expected to increase even further. So, in terms of expectations of AI, what AI can do, when we looked at the answers, the big priorities, so on this graph, the red and the blue bars, either high or moderate impact, we see that there is a big focus on cybersecurity, but also on statistics and research. So really, statistics being the production of statistics, one of the key topics for central bank statisticians, and research, as you know, we are also, as statisticians, supporting a lot research activities. Then, when we looked at actual use of AI, in fact, it's mostly related to data processing and analysis in general. So you see on the left that across all the phases of the data life cycle, there is interest to use AI, but again, focusing on processing and analysis. Nevertheless, we saw on the right that there is a large variety of use cases that are responded by statisticians. So there are, in fact, when we focus on generative AI, so following on the presentation by Giuseppe, so there are also high expectations for using AI. Almost everybody, all the reporting central banks use generative AI. When you look at the actual use cases on the right, you see that it's mainly for text generation, but also code generation, so supporting IT work. Nevertheless, so this was expectations, but when you look at really current applications, the feedback is that they are still limited, and basically they primarily relate to economic research, chatbots, communication support, interacting with users, and statistics. So really, statistics is playing a big role. So you see on the left the expected impact of current applications, and the statistics research are really leading. On the right, when you look at application scope, it's really things like modeling, information generation like chatbots, but also data-related operations. So really, statisticians in central banks are playing, obviously, a key role in terms of use case implementation. But nevertheless, what the feedback is that they are mainly exploring these new techniques, and there is still a limited use for day-to-day operations. So this is the feedback that we receive. It's not very different from what we learn from the industry, where a lot of people are saying something like 80% is exploration, 20% is actual implementation. So then we looked at governance issues. So a lot of interest for AI, more on exploration rather than on use cases. And in terms of governance to support this, we asked a few questions. And what we saw is that most central banks do not have or are only just elaborating a governance framework for using AI. And this was a surprise to us because we know that there are significant challenges and risks. And when we ask the central banks, they say, yes, there are a lot of challenges. On the left, you see the main challenges that were pointed in the survey: skills, risks, and then a lot of system integration, for example. And when you look at on the right, on the top concerns, you will not be surprised, but privacy, cybersecurity, bias, explainability also, so user-friendliness, are top concerns for central banks. So there is a kind of discrepancy between the amount of risks perceived by the central banks and the response in terms of governance framework. Nevertheless, central banks are still doing quite a lot of things to address these issues. And the first step is to have restrictions and policies that are developed to ensure the safe and ethical use of AI in central banks. So what we saw is that most, at least around 75%, most central banks have restrictions on AI tools. Well, this is not a surprise. We know all that we cannot use everything in our daily work. And on the right, you see that, yes, they are taking quite a bit of actions, mainly driven by the board of directors, but also with adequate policies. Nevertheless, despite these actions, what we felt is that AI is still managed in a decentralized way. And this suggests that it could call for more coordination. So what you see on the left is that projects are mostly developed at the level of business areas, which is quite good to ensure that they are focused on user needs. But nevertheless, what you see on the middle is that it suggests that the bank-wide AI governance structure is still in development. And despite some central functions that can play a role to support and address these risks. So we had also a specific part on the survey on the IT aspects. Not surprisingly, so we saw that AI has a key impact on IT. But we had some more detailed insights. And you see, for example, on the left, that the largest impact of AI is really on coding and analytics. This is really where you expect a lot of automation and productivity. And in terms of benefits on the right, the focus is really on these two issues, automation and productivity among central banks. And then, because of the implications in terms of IT, computing resource, etc., we like to understand what are central banks doing to address these IT issues. And what we see is that at least the first issue is to use cloud service or not. So what we see is that cloud is progressively adopted by central banks. But nevertheless, there is still a preference for on-premises solutions. And of course, because of security, sovereignty issues. But what we see is that it's not black and white. On the right, you see that there are several options that are evaluated by central banks. And it depends also on the use case. So it's not only across central banks, but it's within central banks, across business areas, that the choice can differ. Another big issue is whether you use open source models for AI or not, or you use what we call closed AI models. And on this also, it's not black and white. So what we see on the left is that both closed and open source models are used. And it really depends on factors like cost, but also dependency on external vendors. Are really important factors when you try to decide and to choose open source AI. But nevertheless, we had the feeling that open source is really gaining a lot of attention, and a good sign is that in terms of programming language, Python is really the top programming language among central banks. My personal experience is that 10 years ago at the BIS, when we mentioned Python, it was driven by statisticians. The IT function told us, never. You will never use Python. And I will never forget this. So it's a sign that open source has a lot of interest, and we can elaborate further. So then we try to have a view looking forward of what could be important for developing AI in central banks based on the survey response. So it's not my views. I think the first thing is that there is a recognition among central banks, but also national statistical offices, that they have a role to play as data curators. So I don't know, being a reference for the use of data in the society in general. And really on this, central banks can play a role to ensure high quality, well-documented and machine-readable data sets. The second area in this chart is there is still a big focus on improving the global data infrastructure. Most of the AI work, perhaps 80%, is really preparing the data, preparing the text, so that you can push the button and have the applications. So you need to have very good data. And this calls for improving the global data infrastructure. So you need to really to have good data access, data sharing, and good tools and models. And as you know, central banks are doing a lot on this. Let me quote international standards like the SDMX. Let me mention the identifiers like the LEI. And of course, the statistical standards that we are supporting with the new manuals. So all this is very important. The third point is user literacy that came out from the survey. So really, there was a recognition that it's not just implementing AI tools, but you need to develop AI expertise among users, internal, because we have a lot of internal users in central banks, but also external, mainly related to the statistical function of central banks. So this is really something very important. And the last thing that, at least at the BIS, we feel in our statistical production is that it's another push for modernizing our data processes and systems. So to answer the request from our users at the BIS, we need to improve even further our data machinery. So we need to develop and adopt even more modern meta-driven data processes. As I said, for us at the BIS, we rely a lot on the SDMX model, but this is really how we want to pursue the statistical production we are doing. And of course, I cannot finish without this slide. For the BIS, it's very important, and it shows it's obvious in the survey that this calls for collaboration, cooperation, and sharing. This is the feedback we receive from central banks. So, frankly, the response is that a top priority is to share knowledge, but also codes and use cases among central banks. But of course, what we see is that in reality, most central banks do not do that. So how to allow central banks to do more, also with other international organizations, and also perhaps with counterparts in the national statistical system, like the NSOs, can be a top priority. and the AFC committee is certainly looking into this. And when we see on what there could be more collaboration, the focus really is, according to the central banks, is on generative AI, but also on data quality, and on IT issues like the platforms to support all this, and, for example, the cloud. So this is really something that are top priorities in the central bank's mind. So I would like to thank you very much and refer to this publication that is available on the AFC website, and that was, again, co-written with people from the Central Bank of Chile. So many thanks again.
Thank you very much, Bruno. And our final speaker in this session is Fernando Pérez Cruz. He's a professor at ETH Zurich and a senior advisor at the BIS Innovation Hub. And today he'll talk about AI agents, what they are already good at, where they still fall short, and what needs to happen before central banks can use them safely and reliable. Fernando, over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Luis Oscar, for the introduction. Thank you, everybody, for the invitation. I especially would like to thank Alberto Nodon for pressuring Gloria to invite me, and I'm very happy to be here. It's a lovely country. It's my first time in Chile. And thank you to Helen for being really, really helpful in all the organization of my trip and my slides and everything else. So what I want to do today, and just one thing, I'm a senior advisor in MED, not in the Innovation Hub, just to make sure that everybody knows that I work in the same unit as Bruno does. So what I want to talk today about is AI agents. I'm sure you heard about it because it's the hype of 2025. I want to give you a different definition and why they are useful, and this is why they matter, and how they will change things. So, but I'm going to take you on a longer journey before we get there, because I think it's important to understand how we got where we are, right? And there is many things, many of you train as statisticians, econometricians, or economists that don't understand what is the difference between machine learning and AI. So I'm going to try to be provocative there too. So let's see if I got off here alive after my talk. So one thing that happened is large language models in 2018 were a game changer, right? This is something that we discovered by chance, right? This is something that nobody was looking. But we discovered that these models that were trained to predict the next word or the next token were able to answer anything, okay? Many times they weren't correct, but they could answer anything, right? And that is something that we didn't realize. I mean, this is something that we knew in 2018. By 2019, the machine learning community were already very excited. The world in 2022 discovered ChatGPT, right? November 2022, I'm sure all of you played with this before Christmas that year. After that, we have this Cambrian explosion of models, right? Many of these companies, you might know, these are the 14 top companies in the LM arena that you can try, and this is really how the things change. This idea that they can solve anything gave way to this artificial general intelligence idea, which is basically, the definition is, I would say, fluid at best, right? It's a general purpose AI that can do almost all cognitive tasks that a human can do, okay? There is a lot of things that they cannot do, right? You ask one of these things to change a diaper, it's not going to work, right? So what they mean there is, well, with a computer. Right? But there is still a lot of things that they cannot do with a computer. All right? This idea of artificial general intelligence has led to this idea of AI agents. And then there are two standard definitions of AI agents. The one on top, that is probably the one that you use, that is an LLM that can use a tool. Right? For me, that is a very boring definition that will lead only to pain and nothing useful. Right? Because the problem with that definition is that you need the data to be ready to be used. And you know that getting the data ready to be used is complicated, right? The second one is an LLM that can control a computer like you do. In that case, you don't need to prepare the data. You just can tell them, hey, I'm doing this task. Why don't you copy how I do it? And what do you learn from the way that I do it? And then after that, everything is solved. So all the routinary tasks that you're doing, you might be able to teach one of these models to do it for you because they have these zero-shot capabilities. Okay? What is important about my definition of AI agents is that they might lead to AGI, as many in the industry expect. They might not. I don't care. No? I'm an AGI skeptic. Okay? I think all of these AI definitions are really, really useless because we are not going to go there with these models. Because remember that at heart, these models are only predicting the next word or the next token. Okay? Let me take a step back. Right? Now, before going on and explaining about AI agents, I'm going to say what is the difference between AI and machine learning and what is the difference on statistics. And in this joke, you can see that, hey, statistics is the same thing as machine learning. We just put a frame on it, right? And then becomes art. But then it really become popular if you call it AI, right? So from this, basically, AI and machine learning is just pure statistics. I'm going to try to argue that machine learning is not artificial intelligence. The definition of machine learning is very, very simple, right? We want to make predictions and do good in future data. That's the only thing that we care about, making good predictions. What are the definition of AI? The definition for machine learning comes from the Kevin Murphy's book on machine learning, and this is in the first section of the book on AI. And you can see that there are 8 definitions there in 4 different blocks. If you need 8 definitions in which none of them mean anything, there is no AI. Okay? So if you want to get one thing today, there is no AI. The only thing that you have is machine learning. Now, why ML is not statistics? Right? If you look, statisticians and machine learning solve exactly the same problem. We minimize a loss to predict some variable y from some covariate x. Okay? And we have some data. Right? So machine learning and statisticians solve this exactly the same problem. Right? From that definition, machine learning and statistics should be exactly the same. The only difference is statisticians only care about the f of w. You only care about the model. Right? You want the model to be causal. You need the model to be actionable. You want to use that model for something that you want to do afterwards with the model. Right? Machine learners, we don't have that problem. As I told you in the definition, you only care about the error. So for a machine learning, I only care how little that sum is. Not only that, I only care about how little that sum is in some other data that I haven't seen yet. Okay? I see a lot of skeptic faces right now. Let me tell you why being only caring about the error lets machine learning to do things statisticians will never do. Okay? And these are all the things that machine learning people do that statisticians wouldn't do. Okay? A statistician wouldn't do embedding, because embedding is taking some data and map it to a vector space without knowing how you're doing it. Okay? And a statistician will never use an over-parameterized model with hundreds of thousands more parameters than data points. Okay? This leads... Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. So going back to the over-parameterization, and a statistician will never use an over-parameterized model. Okay? That will be an anathema in the way that you work. This also leads to this thing that the data. And this is what Giuseppe said before. Look, we have diminishing return. There is no diminishing returns because as machine learning, we don't care about the model. The model is only an excuse to reduce the error. So if I get more data, I get a bigger model, more over-parameterized, that can reduce their error even more so. Right? So when you talk to somebody that is doing machine learning, they will never, if you ask him how much data you need, the answer is always the more the merrier. And that will lead to self-supervised learning. And that's the idea of the self-supervised learning is very simple, is I'm going to train for a fake task, because getting data, getting images, getting text out of the internet is very easy. getting labels is very hard and very costly. And the idea of the semi-supervised learning is I'm going to train these things in a fake task that I don't want it to use for anything, but I will expect the model to learn something that then I can fine-tune on a simpler task. All of these things led to the zero-shot learning that I mentioned before. Okay? I'm going to move quickly. This idea of the embedding is what I mentioned before. We take an image, text, a chemical formula, and we map it to a vector through a huge neural network. Okay? We don't even know how we do it. It just works. It reduces the error, right? Over-parameterization, right? This is a plot that you will find very familiar when you study statistics, right? You know the capacity, things that are number of parameters, and the error. As you increase the number of parameters to the number of data points, you know that you can make the training error down to 0, but you know that you will be overfitting. Right? That's something that you all have learned in your statistics class, and that there is some sweet spot in the middle. Right? Machine learning, we don't know about this thing. And then we say, hey, what happened if I go to the other side of the curve? And then what we find is we go to this over-parameterized regime. The training error is 0, but the test error, that prediction error that we care about, is not only smaller, it's smaller than the sweet spot that we found in the other part. So all the machine learning models that you're using are on that second part of the graph. Okay? The idea of the self-supervised learning is, in order to do supervised learning, you need to get a lot of data and a lot of labels. The idea of self-supervised learning is, let's create a fake task. And this is not something that the people in natural language created. It was the people in computer vision did in 2014, which is, oh, I just take all the images from the internet, and I just train to say if the center box where the other boxes are. And I do a classifier for predicting is 1 to 8 in the black box. The people in NLP predicted the next token. Okay? All of these things together were done not because I care where the box is, not because I care where the next token is, it's because I want to do something else. I might do one question answering, but then in order to do that, once I learn the language, I can answer the questions with much fewer data training. And that is what is self-supervised learning. Zero shot. That paper down there, the title down there, is the first OpenAI paper. Okay, this is it's not cited very recently, but this is a typical paper in machine learning where they propose to do self-supervised learning, then fine-tuning, and they say, hey, we're going to try this idea of the zero-shot learning, which is, can it answer any question? And the answer is, the more that they train, the curve went up. This is the start. And this, when you read the paper, see that it's completely random. It's something that they just came up at the end of the paper. But it's what created ChatGPT. What is created was why I'm here, why I joined the BIS, right? Otherwise, somebody like my profile wouldn't be in the BIS, right? That's what I bring to this thing. How is zero-shot learning in practice, right? Zero-shot learning in practice, what it works is traditional ML is you're going to train to traduce word by word. So you change the word in English and the word in French, you change the model until it's able to predict any word. The idea of zero-shot learning is that I can only tell, hey, translate this word. But besides that, I can tell that, hey, how many prime numbers are less than 100? And it will tell you 25 out of their memory. And then I ask him, hey, how many prime numbers are between 1,115 and 24? And he's smart enough, right? This is a second generation model. The first one will tell you, oh, there are 200 of them, right? Because that's a probabilistic way. They know that this one they don't know. They create a Python code. They run the Python code, and then they tell you, hey, is 177, right? Those are the ways that they are learning to do this thing. Then I ask them how many atoms, carbon atoms are in methane, and he tells me only 1. I ask it to generate an image, and this is not methane, right? If you ask this today to one of the models, this is something that I did 6 months ago. I tried 2 months ago and still was doing the same result. Models today do it a perfect methane molecule. Okay? So this is also what my question yesterday was, Don't try to solve the problems that these companies are already wanting to try to solve for you, right? These are going to be trillion-dollar companies that their interest is not making errors. Those things that they want to do, let's help them, but not waste time in solving those problems. Okay? Now, let me move on to the agents again that I have forgotten about, right? So if we go to these advances in machine learning, this is, when you read this introduction, you think, hey, this was written last year, 2 years ago. Actually, this is a report from the Obama White House that was written in 2015, 2016. And of course, there was no large language model then. They were talking about computer vision at the time. In this report, they said 50% of that self-driving cars will be a reality very soon, and 50% of the truckers in the US will lose their job. Okay? Let's raise our hand. How many of you came by self-driving car today? Anyone? Okay. 10 years later, self-driving car is only a reality in a few US cities where it's not even hard to drive. Right? So that is something where I'm gonna connect this to the LLMs later. So if we wanna do something that is agent, that is able to do things like humans, we need a time of reference, right? And this is a very good book that all of you know about how humans think, right? And we have the system one, that is the intuitive, the very quick one, that has a lot of biases, and the system two, that is the lazy, that only gets engaged whenever they need to do something. So if we're gonna do an LLM that can do nearly all cognitive tasks, they have to have this system one and system two, right? Or at least be able to emulate them. What we have right now is a very big box that does everything with a very big box, okay? And that has problems when you try to do these things, right? So for me today, there are two types of interesting agents, right? One is deep research. If you haven't used it, I encourage everybody to use these models. And I encourage everybody to use these models every week, every month, because they change so quickly that things that they couldn't do 2 months ago, they can do it right now. The idea of deep research is just emulating system two. It's not AGI. You can give him a task, he asks you some follow-up questions, and he gives you a report of 10,000 words. If you ask for something that you don't know and you need a report, is, oh, this is very smart. Okay? But go and ask something that you know. And then you will start finding all the errors that they have, right? These models are very good if you know what you're asking. And this is one of the things that people think, oh, this is going to substitute work. No, it's not. These models are going to be as good as the person using it. Doing coding, doing research, if you don't know what you're doing, you will get in trouble. Maybe not first week, maybe not first month, but you will get in trouble. So you better keep on learning, okay? I'm already pretty old, so I don't need to learn anything, but I encourage all the young people here to keep on learning. Okay? The second one is the one that I'm very excited about, which is these LLMs that use a computer like human. The one that became very famous was Manus in March, but actually there were 3 before. Anthropic released one in October. I've been playing with it since they released it. It's very, very fun to play with them. I will show you a video afterwards. OpenAI released Operator in January, and DeepMind released there in December, but it's hard to get to use. I have access to all of them. I've played with all of them. Right? If anybody wants to see their limitations, reach out to me, I'll show you a paper. Okay? These computers, if you go to Mariner, it's just an add-on to your Chrome browser, which is the 3 squares that you see there. Operator is a browser that can do anything that you want. If you go to Operator, the things that I ask you to do are very boring things, okay? Because they know that they cannot do anything, right? You don't want to book a taxi, right? That is simple. What you want to do is, hey, what happened if the tariffs keep on changing? What does it mean for my economy, right? Or what happened to prediction inflation and the new conditions? Can I ask those things to this model and give it to me? Okay? I'm going to show you a couple of videos. Just wait a second before we show them. The videos just show it's a full test that I have. They are very short. And what I want you to look is at the errors that they have. It's impressive. I ask them questions, and they use the mouse, they use the keyboard, and they go back and forth doing everything. Okay? But they have problem with memory, right? The first one is solve 4 linear set of equations. It solved them correctly. but in the second one, doesn't remember what the solution is. In the last one, I show you in a picture. I ask questions, and it gets errors over errors when you are doing over it. Okay? So can we show the two videos? Okay. So the first one is a 1. This is a 3. The next two are 2s. Okay? Okay. This is accelerated with respect to they do it, right? So it's slower when they do it on real time, right? But now they only get the points if they get it right, and oh no, right? It forgot the solution for Q2, right? It was 3, right? So even something that as a human you can do, even I tell you at the beginning of the instructions that you can go back and forth, right? We can play the second video now. Okay? Can you stop it? So the second word is not rural. You can play. Keep on going. So in this case, it's going back to check how many A's there are, right? You say, hey, there are how many A's? Let me go back and check how many A's, and it clicks 6. Okay? Now it goes to the next one and make an error and clicking, and then it takes a few rounds until it realizes that it got the error wrong, right? And it goes back and forth, like not knowing what it's doing, okay? If you see that as a human, you engage System 2 and say, hey, man, what am I doing? Let me change this, okay? So this thing is impressive, and now it's going to say, oh, now I got here, and now it's able to control it, and then it's going to count the number of green A's that are 3, it's going to count 2. And then it's going to be very stupid and change it here. Okay? Still, it's impressive that they can use the mouse, they can interpret whatever they are reading. This is by themselves, right? That's the thing that we do. Okay? So these things are very interesting because of this, right? As central bankers, or you're supervising banks, and anti-money laundering is a compliance that is very costly for banks. They're already using machine learning to detect the next transaction. But doing the compliance, that you have a human looking into different databases, going back and forth, and it takes them very long time to do those things. If they say, oh, you need to change everything in order to do compliance automatically with AI, they will not do it. They're not going to spend a single extra dollar or peso or Swiss franc in order to do those things, right? But you can use one of these models and teach them how to do it. They just follow the human. They look at the screen that they're looking, they look at the keyword, they look at the mouse. And if you gather enough data, and for compliance, clearly they are doing that all the time, you can teach these models. This will be coming to you pretty soon, okay? Let me finish with this slide here, right? And why the self-driving car is an important experience of where we are with LLMs, right? In 2004, 2005, there was no self-driving car, right? DARPA created a grand challenge, and Stanford and CMU their cars got to the end. They were very slow, they were very not good. From 2005 until 2015, they were impressive. So much that the Obama White House did this report expecting self-driving cars to be everywhere, okay? But we have two problems with self-driving cars, okay? One, okay, getting to 90%, it was easy, but they have two problems. There are many decisions that you have to do every 100 milliseconds, and there is 31 million seconds a year. So the things that you're deciding all the time, you need a probability of errors 10 to the minus 5, 10 to the minus 6. Otherwise, you get into errors every minute, every hour. The other thing is that there are a lot of things, low probability events, that still happen. Okay? And then we can see, if you go to Tesla, you can see all the errors that they have because they don't have those probabilities well. In LLMs, we have exactly the same problem. If you're going to control a computer, I just show you the errors that they have, right? If you're making a decision every 100 milliseconds, you have to get it very, very right. Or you have to be able to control when you get in the errors that they don't know how to do it. If we go back to the self-driving cars, which for me is important, is we were expecting self-driving cars everywhere for everybody now. We only have it in 4 US cities, right? LLMs will happen the same thing. You will have to train them for the tasks that you care about. So what I'm expecting is that these models are not going to be developed everywhere. They're going to substitute everything. Is people are going to spend the money to train the models for the things that they care about and that they can make money out of it. So in a year or two, we will start seeing those slow curves of people deploying these models. So these things are very useful for you and me when we use them. They are not useful for enterprise because their error rate is still very high. Okay? The other thing that I will expect, and just I will finish with this, is this idea that instead of having a huge LLM that can do everything, you should have a modular structure. This is something that Jan LeCun already proposed in 2022. Nobody's following him. So just to tell you, in which the configurator will be the system 1, and the critic will be the system 2, and you have a short memory for those things. Okay? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Fernando. Although it's true that we don't have self-driving cars here, but I was raised watching the Supersónicos or the Jetsons for those English speakers, and they have these flying cars, and they have these teleconferences, and I was dreaming for many years that we would have now. And now I have my phone, and I can do a teleconference anywhere in the world. So maybe in a few years we will have these self-driving cars. So let's open the floor for 2 questions. I ask you, please raise your hand, say your name and institution, and go ahead with your question. There is a question over there.
Hola. Hello, my name is Federico. I'm from Central Bank of Chile. And first, I want to thank you all for the presentation. It was really nice, really interesting. And I want to ask you all, in this context on how fast AI is evolving, especially with agents developing on LLMs, I don't know if you read some days ago that Bill Gates recently suggested that he thinks that in the next 10 years, people will work just 2 days. In that context, how do you envision AI reshaping the labor market, not only by requiring workers to developing new skills related to AI knowledge, but also by potentially replacing a significant number of human roles, even in highly specialized fields? And what type of implication do you see for productivity, inequality, and labor regulations?
That's an easy question.
It is. It is. No, well, I was watching Bruno because this kind of question arises also, I think, in one of your last governance meeting in Basel, the impact of AI on labor market. Well, here, of course, we can express our idea, which is also affected by the present situation. So maybe our answer in, say, 1 year from now will different. But right now, I see that there will be an impact in the sense that there will be a reduction in the need of white collar work. Not, I mean, you were talking about 1 or 2 days per week. I don't think we are in that, unfortunately, we are in that situation. But there will be some impact. I read that also in some factories in China, they are replacing people with these robots. So in doing almost all the detail about the machine. So I'm not able to provide a figure, a numerical figure on whether it's going to impact like 10 or 15%. But I assume that the introduction of AI in factories will affect, will reduce some of the jobs. That's my view.
I mean, I wish I knew, right? That's the. I think right now, as I mentioned in the self-driving car experience, we are still in that slope going up, right? And it's where the probability of error of these models get to some task that they can start replacing workers. And we will see, I think the main thing where we will see those things, and if you want to keep, is track whatever is happening in the coding industry, the software developers. These models code very well. They are very good. Still, they make a lot of security errors. And that can create problems into the future. So I think right now, the number of possibilities of replacing work will take very long. At the same time, if we're talking about full tasks in the AGI, I think you will have to train for each one of the specific tasks. You have to go one task at a time. Because given that they have been trained in a self-supervised manner, there is a lot of things that they don't know. So I will expect that at some point, we will find tasks in which it's not doing good. And we already see people that went AI first in some of the things, and they're already backing that up, right? Klarna is one of these things that basically got rid of all their call center people, and now they are rehiring them because they are losing customers. And you see all of the people that are doing these things over and over again having errors that are too large for business to be relying on them. Working 2 days a week, I think that's a decision for the society, right? If we believe that is no more work, should some people be out of work and some people work 5 days a week, or do it 2 days a week? I think that's a democratic process. And it's not statisticians or machine learner or computer scientists shouldn't be answering that question. It should be the general public through their representatives. And that's, again, we'll see where we get to that part.
I think we have another question here. Solange.
Hello, good morning, and thank you very much for this very interesting presentations. I am Solange Prestain from the CMF, Financial Market Commission, that's regulator supervisor of the financial sector in Chile. And we do have an AI policy, a governance, and we are using AI tools for our tasks at the CMF for supervising the financial industry. And one of the things that we're struggling with is confidentiality of the data and of the documents that we work with. And that has limited our potential use of these AI tools. How are central banks and your experience in terms of how to take advantage of these powerful tools, but at the same time keep the confidentiality of data and documents? And is that a barrier somehow? Because when you upload information to use it for these training tools, you might be exposing the data, or that's not a concern. Thank you.
I think this is a very good question for Bruno.
Thank you. No, it was in all these concerns raised by central banks. I think it's fair to say that people see also a lot of opportunities to deal with these issues. And I was just discussing with Luis from Central Bank of Portugal, and we want at the IFC to have a specific event on these issues, because what we face as statisticians is a huge amount of information that is coming from administrative data sets, and how to make use of them while protecting confidentiality, etc., is really on the agenda. And on this, yeah, a lot of risks, but also a lot of opportunities. In EXDA, for example, I don't know if you're aware, this network of central banks and NSOs is also working on this. So there are a lot of techniques that are available now to deal with these issues. It's not, it's part of the solution. And back to the previous question on the in general impact of AI on our tasks, globally, you're right. It will be a lot of changes in the labor force, etc. But for public statisticians, my feeling is that there is a lot of work for the many years coming, because just making sense of all the data universe that we are facing. Well, I would say we can double the size of the BIS statistical unit, and we will have everybody very occupied with all these tasks. So, meaning, yes, a lot of risks, but a lot of new opportunities to make use of all this data. My feeling is that the NSOs are in the same situation also. That, frankly, there is a need for more resource to take advantage of all these new opportunities.
There is another question over there.
Sí, gracias. Maybe address more to Bruno and to the questioner, but maybe also for the others. And I found very surprising that the issue of sovereignty issues is not popping up with the AI element so prominently. I didn't see that element in the questionnaire, even referring to the risks, because we are having now, at least in Europe or in the ECB, significant discussions about the issue of sovereignty, just for the cloud issues, for example. But even if you now engage that, you will insert a lot of processes within the central banks, which are developed by companies which are in either China and America, because this is where the progress is bigger and where you can have the biggest cash, that you make dependent, and what could be the risk that then this information is traveling through security services or, I don't know, governments of other of these countries that are behind the companies that are developing all these things. I was a bit surprised not to see that coming so prominently in the discussions, because, as I said, in Europe, this is now, I would say, even the biggest discussion, the sovereignty risk, much more than cyber risk or whatever other of these things. So if you can say a word on that.
No, it's my fault. I tried to mention this en passant during my slides, but no, it's a key issue linked to this privacy and cybersecurity issues that is mentioned. So, and even for us at the BIS, so there are two issues. One is that if you use IT infrastructure, one issue is where it's located, of course. For example, at the BIS, we have immunities, but not in all countries in the world. So where the data are located is important. But the second issue is who is really managing the data. So it can be, for example, the data can be located in Switzerland, but if it's managed by foreign companies, then you have these sovereignty issues. So yes, this is very important for us, and the solution is that, again, it's not black and white. You can do cloud computing for non-confidential data, or you don't have a lot of issues, but for very highly confidential data. So, for example, at the BIS, we manage data on global systemic banks that are individual data and that are shared only among a very limited group of countries in the world. There's no point that we are not planning to put this data in the cloud right now. But of course, for a lot of statistical work that we do using publicly available data sets, commercial data, etc., we can do this. So it's not black and white, the answer. This would be the answer.
Right what you said, but for example, if you want to really benefit from these big developments, it's very difficult that you can develop that on-prem unless you did huge investments, because that is then very costly, then you don't have the support, and so on and so forth. So you may need to go to cloud solutions, then you are bound by the software of these companies in the cloud solution, and then you buy their II. Right. And then in the end, you know that, I don't know, the CIA is knowing everything what's happened with a bank in Spain, for example, just because they have through that potential access to that, or you don't know whether this is the case or not. And this is certainly, I think, at the moment also at least a very big question mark about all this, as I said, at least in Europe.
No, you're right. And there's two aspects. One is vendor dependency, because, of course, then the risks that you are involved. And very simple things. We know that the update of some software will no more be available on premises. You will have to be in the cloud. So what do you do? I think the answer is, again, depending on the types of data you are dealing with.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if I can add on this, I mean, I think we have to make some trade-off and compromise. Because here we have two problems, compromises. We have two problems, confidentiality, which she raised, and sovereignty. Let's say technological sovereignty. For Europe, thinking of technological sovereignty, it's more a dream, like something that can be realized in 1 year or 2 years. Because I mean, there are structural differences. For confidentiality, of course, you can put your data, you can put your process, your agent on-prem. But doing that means that you have to do either bigger investment or you satisfy yourself with smaller solution. Because, of course, the best ones are outside. So this is really a problem that you cannot find a solution, I mean, especially sovereignty. Because now we have fragmentation.
Just one quick thing, right? You don't need to use machine learning for everything, right? So if something is highly confidential and you have models that you're already using with that data, keep it on premises. Don't need to use the latest model for those things. No, that's because that's one of the things is, and is there all this hype with machine learning or AI today? There are things for which you have an extra very good results. For other things, it's just, okay, just giving you. So I think what it makes sense is let's work on those things that are not confidential, that you learn from them, right? Right now we are in this very steep curve. Let's play, let's learn, let's do all the things that we can do with the data that we can do. And once we get there is, okay, in 5 years, this model will become cheaper. The GPUs will become cheaper. You might be able to say, look, these things I can do on premises now. So just organize your roadmap for adopting these things to do the low-hanging fruit with the public data, and then worry about those things into the future. And if you are in a non-US or non-China country, and good, so encourage your country to develop the infrastructure, because maybe you don't need an infrastructure. You might need an infrastructure for the whole government. I mean, when I was growing up and my mother was doing her PhD, there was one computer in Spain, right? And researchers at university have priorities set when they were sending their code, right? There was one in Madrid. She was doing her punch card in order to do her statistics for her PhD. We might need to go to one of those things. And in Europe, you have them, right? The Barcelona has a supercomputer. Zurich has one in Lugano. There are a few in Sweden and in Finland, and there are other European countries. So maybe we need to invest on those models where we can trust who is handling our data. We still need to encrypt the information when it goes from one place to another, but that we still know how to do those things. But yeah, AI is not for everybody all the time. And I think we need to do that thing, right? There is this push, I mean, in which everything is AI, right? No, there is a lot of things. I think Bruno said it, right? There is a lot of work for a statistician. My point, and I didn't say it out loud, right? I said that machine learning is not a statistics. I didn't say that machine learning is better or worse than statistics. It's something completely different, right? So there is things where there is something for machine learning to do. There is things in which standard statistical tools are the ones that you need to keep on doing. And we will come on that thing for years to come.
So one last question.
Sanjeev Mahajan from the Office for National Statistics. Thank you very much for those really innovative presentations. But I just want to challenge you a little bit. I don't think it's white-collar workers. So, for example, in the UK, My doctor's surgery, they are trialing that you either telephone or you go online and you connect to the surgery. You put in your symptoms. Then you have an iteration of questions that you have to answer. And after about 3 or 4 minutes, they will tell you whether you need to see a doctor or not. They will give you what the solution is, and bye-bye. Okay? So I don't think it's just white collar. I think what I'd say is the impact will vary across industries and in different ways. Some industries may not be affected in the same way as other industries. So the second thing I wanted to also say was the top 10 jobs that existed 10 years ago are not in most of them are not in the top 10. The top 10 jobs that exist today, most of them didn't exist 10 years ago. Okay? Now, where am I coming from this? I think, is there scope, have you got ideas of how the statistics offices and the central banks can produce maybe a handful of indicators to monitor the rapid change that's going on? Okay, and I think that will help policymakers. It will give us a handle on how rapid the change and the type of change. And I'm not saying 30, 40, 50 indicators dashboard. What 2 or 3 indicators do you think could be developed to help also inform policymaking as monitor the change? Thank you.
I mean, just job market changes, right? And we don't know where it's going. I think keeping those statistics, we have statistics for unemployment in different fields. That could be one thing. The other thing is if you go to the tech companies, Anthropic is doing a lot of work of understanding how workers are using cloud. And they have a couple of reports showing that is the middle employees that are using these Anthropic demos. The very top high earners, they don't use it. Doctors mostly on that category, and then the lower earners that are basically working with their hands, they are not using it. But that's a report, and they have somebody, I don't remember his name, but I can share you with you later, that they are really thinking how this will change. I mean, Anthropic is probably one of the companies that is thinking more about these things, and they have a lot of people working on that team.
Thank you. Thanks again to our speakers and to all of you for your questions. I think one thing is clear, AI isn't just about efficiency or speed, but it's also about decisions, rules, and trust. So the tools are racing ahead, and we need to catch up in terms of our governance framework to manage all these trade-offs. So now I think we have a coffee break, and we will be back at 11. So enjoy the rest of the conference, and we'll meet again at 11.
Nice to be in the panel
Thank
with
you.
you.
No, okay. Well, thank you very much for being here for the last panel of the conference. My name is Alberto Nodón. I am member of the board of the Central Bank of Chile and also chair of the Irving Fisher Committee on Central Bank Statistics. It is, of course, a pleasure to moderate this panel, which is, as I mentioned, the last panel of this conference that I think has been very, very rich and thought-provoking conference, as usual, because this is the 6th time, I think, that we are doing this. We have been discussing many, many things during the last day and a half. I think that I hope that all of you have heard many insights that are useful for your work. Now we're turning to a question that I think is very important, and this is the name of this panel. Basically, the question is, how do we navigate the challenges and opportunities that came with all this transformation in artificial intelligence and so on? To help me think about this, we have a very, very good panel, all of them expert in this area. Starting from my right, we have Bert Cross. He is the Chief Statistician and Data Officer at the IMF. Then Gloria Peña, she is Director of Statistics and Data Division here at the Central Bank of Chile. On my left, we have Luis Ángel Maza. He's Director of Statistics at the Banco de España. And on the other end, we have Bruno Tissot. His official name, his official job is Head of Statistics and Research Support at the BIS, but most important, he is the heart and the soul of the IFC committee. Everything there works because Bruno is working more hours than you think is possible. So, well, this panel, we will divide the panel in three major teams. First, we want to talk about digital transformation and the use of artificial intelligence in statistics. The second block will be about building trust and improving communication. And finally, we will talk a little bit about institutional collaboration and governance. So let me start with the first topic, and let me begin with Bert. And this is the question: what are the main uses of artificial intelligence in your institution today? So, at the IMF, and what potential do you see ahead?
Thank you, Alberto. Yeah, there's so much to say about that, and so much already has been said about that. I want to say a few things about how we use it, but also coming back to the last question, what statistical institutes the central bank should measure around it. If you go how we use it, I gave some examples yesterday. We use, well, machine learning a lot. That's more or less established. Machine learning in the sense you make one prediction giving a lot of input, so satellite images or port watch information about ships and translate that in an estimate. That's something that's basically, yeah, we're doing that a lot, and I guess that's done more in your presentation, in Giuseppe's presentation. It said a lot about coding. So that's a lot. On the generative AI, so not making a prediction or a point estimate, but generating content. Well, basically, I showed yesterday the two main things we're working on now. Talk to the manuals, asking methodological advice, and yeah, asking difficult questions, like if a tourist buys a book in a foreign country, is that a service or a good? Well, the tool should lead you in the right direction. I think something else is StatsGPT, trying to ensure that good data can be found. I completely agree with Fernando. We should work together with tech companies. We work together with Google. I met with them 2 weeks ago. I'll meet them again 2 weeks from now to see how we can join forces, because they want good data to be found, and our goal as IMF that good economic data can be found. So if someone looks for data, then it should find the right data. So if one wants to know the GDP of Chile, they should find your data, and we're more than happy to distribute it as IMF or OECD or whatever. And trying to work out that together using LLMs. And why is that important? Because people don't go to websites anymore. People are used to the new LLMs, to ChatGPT, to others. That's why they find data, and we should ensure that if we look there, our data can be found. We should have our data there where people look for it. Coming back to the role as statistics producers, I think Sanjeev's question is very relevant. I mean, there are big issues in the world. Many countries have large debts. There's slow economic growth. There's an aging population, so the labor population goes down. So it means productivity is very essential. And we as statisticians should measure productivity gains. And how do you measure productivity gains from AI? It's not restricted to white-collar work, but it's a large part in white-collar work. So how do you measure productivity of government? I know my productivity increased. We got Copilot in the IMF, and it's very easy for me to, I just Copilot a sentence like, how long can I speak in my keynote? And it automatically finds the right email and gives the answer. Or if I miss part of the meeting, I say summarize the meeting. So I know I'm more efficient, but how do you measure that? And that is important to base business investments on that, business cases, so measuring productivity is important. But how do you measure productivity? Then you should measure outputs and you should measure inputs. And much of government, well, how do we measure outputs? By the cost of the inputs. So if you measure the outputs by the cost of the inputs, there's no productivity. Well, the UK has done some wonderful job. You got the Atkinson report 20 years ago already. And there, for especially education and health, they're looking at products. But even there, how you measure quality changes. So this is a big issue and a challenge for a statistician, but important. But also, not only about productivity, I'm delighted to see so many young people in the room today, at least a lot younger than I am. And I guess many of you are wondering, hearing Fernando, Giuseppe and others talk, what should I do with my career? What should I invest in? What's the right thing to study? And so it's really important to find out what is the job market doing? Well, it's not easy to define AI jobs, not easy to measure it. We can use big data. I showed Indeed and LinkedIn data to follow that on. But it's a task for us statisticians to ensure there's good data about AI, about the effects, about the productivity, the changes in the labor market, so people can make decisions on that. But also the production of AI. The BEA in the US, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, has done a wonderful job in digital satellite accounts. In the new SNA, there's finally a definition of SNA, of AI. It's included in IP now. So there's so much work to do, not only in using AI, but also in describing the effects of AI, and we should step up to the standard. And in using AI, we should be willing to experiment. Things like generative AI, it's a lot of explorative work. What can we do? We should be willing to try it out, share experiences, bring things together. So conferences like this, where we share experiences, networks like the Urban Fisher Committee and others are important to share what we're doing and learn from each other.
Thank you very much, Bert. Let me move to the other side, to Bruno. What do you think are the greatest tensions and risks in the using of AI in official statistics? Because there are some use cases, of course, but the tension between both.
Yes. Well, the tension was between exploration, according to the survey I presented, exploration versus production. And there's a lot of exploration and what is production. And it seems to me that it's not a surprise that the statistical function is leading the work, because first, there is a lot of important data use cases in statistics, and also because we have a good understanding of the data. So I'm not surprised. So at the BIS, there's a lot on other areas, banking area, etc. They are doing a lot on AI, but I would say that in statistics we are really exploring concrete use cases. But then we face a lot of challenges. Obviously, IT resources, fine. We find that organizational issues, the fact that you can still have silos between IT, between business experts, between statisticians is an issue. And the third one is still limited information standardization. So basically, exaggerating a little bit, but we are facing a vast amount of data because we have data sources that were there, but we were not exploiting. For example, we have a long experience of collecting speeches from central bankers over the past several decades. We are never using it. Now we can use it with the LLM. Or we have a huge amount of data that we buy from commercial data providers, and just making use of this data is really a big issue. So IT, organizational barriers, and also information standardization that is still very limited to do our job properly.
Thank you. Gloria, the experience at the Central Bank of Chile using artificial intelligence. We are in the first step probably, but we have done something.
Yes. Well, as our governor said yesterday, we at the Central Bank having our strategic plan, a very good objective is to increase and promote the use of data and data analytics across the whole bank. So this is our planification. We are working on that. In many areas, we are more advances, and other we have to start. For instance, on statistics, we are using, I think, much more and more all the analysis on data imputation, validation. We also are using text classification and coding. People from the monetary policy is also involved in analyzing inflation, nowcasting on GDP. People from the financial stability area are working with sentimental indicators. And also we are trying to push more and more that people from administrative areas also can be involved in using these tools. For instance, we are working with the people from the legal department in order they can have a more rapid way to find all the minutes from the board and have a rapid search. So we are working to find some solution, some tool with AI that allow them to get to rapid answers. And also I will say in other administrative areas, people is using more, well, we are, the whole bank, we can use Copilot, and we are learning how to use all the facilities and the possibilities that this tool offer to us. And I will say that it's an ongoing process, but there are a lot of interest. There are a lot of people interested in using, and so we are pushing IT people to offer more opportunities, more software and hardware that we can be allowed to use it within the bank.
Thank you, Gloria. Luis Angel, the experience at the Bank of Spain, most important uses for AI, and in particular because Europe is more advanced in this area, which are the, let's say, institutional capabilities, both legal and technical, that are most needed to implement?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for this invitation and to participate in this panel with these these colleagues with deep knowledge in this area. The point of view and the analysis that we made in the Banco de España about this subject, I would like to share an idea and my personal point of view that the importance of the data. We were talking about artificial intelligence, but the data is the fuel of the artificial intelligence. And they are not disconnected. They are all together because it's necessary to have a very strong strategy in artificial intelligence, but it's necessary to have a solid background in the use of the data. The experience of Banco de España in the artificial intelligence, for example, last week was released the strategic plan of the Banco de España through 2030. and was identified different specific topic for this strategic plan. And two main areas was related with technology, and the artificial intelligence will play a very important role in this technology. And the second pillar is the data. And it's necessary to put all together technology, artificial intelligence, and data. In this strategic plan, Banco de España has announced a very important project that will be launched in the coming months, is the establish a new center of experimentation and implementation of artificial intelligence, not in Madrid, in Barcelona. It's located in Barcelona, not by chance. Will be there to try to capture the synergies with the Barcelona Computing Center. But this center will have a connection with the business area, with the rest of the Banco de España, and the possibility to, from the business areas, to ask the help of this center to implement this new project. Several projects has been selected to introduce in this center from different perspectives, from monetary policy, from supervision, for human resources. In this moment, we are working in the possibility to introduce statistical projects to this center of experimentation. For example, we are thinking, yesterday we were talking in a session about the possibility to use artificial intelligence tools to connect with these users, no? With friendly users, chatbot, this kind of examples. But we are thinking about the possibility to the substitution of the traditional surveys. For example, this morning we have a very interesting session about the use of the artificial intelligence agents, the possibility to make a substitution of traditional surveys, but this kind of methods. No? And I think that we have broad opportunities to introduce artificial intelligence. We are coming in the first steps of this long process, but it's very promising. Thank you, Alberto.
Thank you. But let me push a little bit more on this question, and this also for Gloria, because we have seen from surveys that within central banks, people on the research department are the ones that use more artificial intelligence. But probably a lot of the productivity gains are not there, but are in the, in many other areas, probably even more administrative areas. So that's the reason why I asked you about what capabilities we have to develop at central bank level in order to use artificial intelligence, not only, doing faster and better codes for a paper. I understand, but maybe I'm wrong, that you have a project at the Banco de España that is kind of an API that is designed to facilitate the use of artificial intelligence across units.
Yes, there is a project to try to spread the capability of the artificial intelligence, not only focus in the economic area, the research area, to try to spread these tools in other business areas. For example, human resources. It's very manual process, actually. Currently, for example, when you have to analyze the profile of thousands of candidates that they are collecting for this specific post, is very demanding, this kind of project, jobs. We are thinking about the possibility to automatize this process, the use of these techniques. But here there is a barrier, is the legal barrier. It's necessary to ask the permission to the candidates the use of this kind of tools, because it's little risky to introduce without the permission of the candidates. But totally agree with you that is not only focus the possibility to implement this kind of tools in research. There are another typical areas, more manual, not so sexy than the research, and the capability to gain efficiency are bigger.
Thank you. And Gloria, your vision about this sort of trade-off, because on the one hand, this is just a general purpose technology, artificial intelligence. So I would expect that more a bottom-up finding of use cases, because this is like Excel, right? Like you cannot say use Excel for this, but people immediately realize how to use Excel for their particular duty. So how do you think we should balance this idea of letting every unit to explore and to find a use case for artificial intelligence, and on the other hand to have a top-down view of pushing artificial intelligence within the central bank?
Well, I think I realized that, as Fernando said before, it's not necessary to use AI for everything. We have to make a lot of automatization process, but you don't need sometimes to use AI. And as you said, statistician, we know to do a lot of things, and we have done for many, many years, and we can use also machine learning or AI, but still there are some processes, or especially in some administrative areas in the bank, that we see that is not a necessity to have AI. So our support there, or what we expect that people do, is mainly to order the databases. We are prepared, for instance, we will have to be prepared for a new legislation on personal data privacy. So we have to be prepared that we have the information. If some individual come to the bank and ask for what we have from them. So we need to make some order of the databases, and sometimes you don't need AI. So I think, for instance, we have a project, very, very new one and innovative, on measuring natural capital in the division, and there it's important to use AI, because we are using satellite images. So then, obviously, there you will need that tool. And also, I imagine in the monetary policy or in stability and financial stability area, probably for analyzing a huge volume of data, is mainly we recommend obviously to use AI. So I think it's like it's trending topic to say, well, we are using AI, but sometimes it's not a necessity at all.
Thank you. Let me move to the second topic, which is trust and communication. And let me, well, here in Chile we are, at the end of the year we have presidential elections, and we all have some candidates, maybe all of them, accusing the other candidates of using bots to spread misinformation. And I think that misinformation and skepticism is, a problem for official statistics, because people, in one way or the other, put all the information in the same basket. So we have to work harder than in the past to be more credible and also accessible to the people. So, Luis Angel, what are the strategies that you are using to help to build and sustain trust on your statistics?
Okay, I think that is a very important question. No? But the problem of the trust is that you cannot demand. You can't gain and maintain, but it's not possible to demand. And to get trust from the public is necessary to work with rigor, with integrity, and with consistency. And To get this objective, it's important to make the statistics with the following the principle of the quality. The independence is the important role. And the independence is necessary to have a legal framework that protect the activities of the statistician in the official statistics. No? For example, it's necessary to try to avoid the external pressures from the politicians, from the economic interest, to try to preserve the trust in the official statistics from the general public. And I think that it's necessary to communicate that to the general public that the activities of the official statistics have a special legal framework that protects our activities, and the statistics that we produce has the best standard in terms of methodology, but in terms of independent interest. I think that is key to the perception of the general public, the quality of our work.
Thank you. Bert, in your experience, and probably you know a lot of the experience of many other central banks, should statistical offices take a more proactive stance in countering misinformation?
I think the goal of statistical offices is to make data that are being used and that are credible and like the gold standard for information. And in order to attain that, I think it starts with what Louis said. We need to have good quality data. And that's indeed following methodology, standards, but that's also not only seeing it as a mechanical process, looking at the outputs. So if we produce central government balance sheets, well, the statisticians who publish that should compare that to the bank balance sheets, to see whether they're consistent, balance of payments, national accounts. If you publish the CPI, just look in the newspapers and see whether things are credible. So quality is, of course, following procedures. Within every process there are mistakes and uncertainties and missing data. So it's always important also to look at the credibility of the outcome compared to other data. It's a profession. It's not just following an algorithm. Apart from that, metadata is incredibly important, just to tell what you're doing, being open. We talk a lot to rating agencies, and they really value transparency. For example, the IMF has these dissemination standards, STDS, STDS+. And there you describe what data you produce, but also how it's made. It's using the equality assessment framework. And being very transparent how you make the data. What is the base year? Is the CPI for the whole country or only about the capital? How do you do quality corrections? I mean, no one completely follows the SNO BPM, but describing exactly what you're doing builds trust. So transparency builds trust. And then communication. Yesterday there was a great session about communication, and there's a whole chapter in SNA and BPM now. So it is important. And communication is, of course, you tell about your data. You tell it in words that people understand, in media that people are looking at, social media, I guess, as most of the institutes now have, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever. But the dialogue is so important because in COVID we were really good at that as statistical community. We talked to government, we were sitting on the table and they needed very fast information. The economy was changing, no one knew exactly what to do. So what information did they need? What is retail sales doing? What's happening? Are people still confident and happy behind closed doors? What's happening to many other things, and health, of course. So that was a very close cooperation, talking to policymakers and really finding out what they need. And that goes a lot further than just communicating what you have, really trying to figure out, trying to understand their processes. In my department, we have always 20 statisticians who go on missions to countries. We go to countries all over the world every year. And they are part of the team. So they're in program teams, they negotiate, well, they don't negotiate themselves, but they sit on the table with country teams negotiating programs with all countries. They look in surveillance missions. And by being part of that team, they really see firsthand what is needed, how the data is being used, and that leads to us improving the data, communicate the data better, and also improving the context. So it's never enough just to produce data, publish it, and say, okay, they'll use it. It's also not good enough to call them and you should use it. It's really important to not only talk to the users, but try to be part of the process to understand and really feel why they need the data, and then it's going to be used a lot more. The same for journalists. We give, of course, to journalists how to use our data portal. They're redistributing our data. So these are a few things I think are very important.
That's interesting because, quality is critical, but not enough, because all the problem with misinformation is that it's difficult to distinguish good and bad information. So, but let me push a little bit on this in this following sense. We central bank produce banknotes, and we are very active in telling people how to identify good banknotes that are counterfeited banknotes. We have web pages where to explain how to identify a real banknote and so on, and we do sometimes campaigns, to the mass public about that. When we issue a new family of banknotes, we go to matinals and TV and show that. So, but we don't do that with the statistics, right? We communicate with people, with users. We publish the metadata. We do, but always or mostly focus to the small group of people that use it, but not to the mass audience. So, do you think central banks should do something more? Like the things that we do with the banknote, or not? For example, if some of our statistics are used in a way which is not the correct one, because they pick a number and do a big history with that number, but we know that it's not, it's misusing the information. Should we do something?
Well, these are two different questions. The first question, yes, I think we should really try to educate everyone about what are good data and good statistics. And when we have major changes in methodology, it's good to reach out to journalists and tell them, at least the serious journalists, so they can interpret the data better. It's important to make YouTube and Instagram videos or reels just to explain things, just to explain that, and also invest in transparency and see how you can determine good statistics. And that's the reason we're developing something like ChatGPT, because we want data to be found. When people look for data, they want to go to our data. And that's why we talk to tech companies to ensure that they also lead to trustworthy data. And they want that too. So it's just trying to figure out how. So yes, we should always be very much involved in explaining what is good data, how to recognize good data, be transparent about it, and be very active in approaching journalists, in policymakers, etc. The second question depends for each country. For some country, the chief statistician has that role, others they don't. On the one hand, it's good. It fights misinformation. It helps interpreting the data well. On the other hand, it makes you a little bit vulnerable because you get an openly discussion with someone. I'm not sure that always helps. So it depends. But it's always good to be proactive. What's a really good practice is that when you publish data, you don't only publish the data, but also a story about that. So how can it be interpreted? So then you show, well, you promote the data, of course, but you also show how it should be interpreted, what's the right way, and that helps. So before anyone misuses it, you can just say, well, this is how you can use it, this is an example. And that's also good because then your own people use your own data, so it improves the data. They look at it not only as the outcome of a process, but as a real statistics. So, but the question whether you should actively fight misinformation, well, I think that depends a little bit on the circumstances. There's some things you can do and some things you need to be careful.
Thank you. Bruno, in this issue of communicating and gaining credibility, do you see a role for partnership with, I don't know, educators, civil society, the media, in partnership for doing this communication and building of credibility.
Yes, so I think the starting point is exactly what Luis Angel said. So AI is linked with data because garbage in, garbage out. So you have the tools if you put data that are not. The second thing is that we have a good starting point in central banks or national statistical offices because we are not building from scratch. We have good data governance. We have the fundamental principles of official statistics. By the way, they state clearly that if the data, you have to facilitate the interpretation of the data, and you have even to correct misinterpretation of the data. We have standards. I'm a great fan of, I mentioned already, the SDMX standard, because SDMX is pushing a lot of emphasis on metadata, on transparency of the information. So we have a lot of things already internally in central banks as well as in national statistical office. But you're right, the issue is the other data universe and how to facilitate. And here I think we have a lot of work to do. This is the curator role that I was mentioning for national statistical office, but also central banks, they can support that. Currently, there is a lot of initiatives, especially in the context of the UN, and NSOs are really leading the work, and central banks are trying also to support. How can we act to enhance, how can I say, not to rubber stamp the quality of the data available in the society, but at least to provide guidance or references in terms of practices, in terms of applying well-recognized standards. I know that in the UK, when you are using private data source for official statistics, there are some principles. I know that the Federal Reserve, they are using private data source for the financial accounts. But for this, you have self-commitments from the data providers regarding the quality of the data. But here, you have a lot of work to do, I think, and it should be in coordination for all the national statistical systems. Central banks can help, but they are not alone. It should be also together with the National Statistical Office and the other producers of official information.
I would like to add a little. I totally agree with you, Bruno. I think that the question is the most important question of the conference, the relevance of the communication, dissemination. Sometimes we thought in the past that the communication is the last step of our job. But it's not the last step, it's the core of our job. If the data of statistics are not understood, are not used, are not has any value for the society. And it's very important to communicate well, to identify. Yesterday we watched a very interesting session about communication, no? And the conclusion of this session was the importance to identify clearly that we have the diversity of the users. The capabilities, the technical knowledge of the statistics is totally different from the researchers, from the media, journalists, general public. And our job is to try to create content, information, explanation for each individual group of users. In the past, the intermediaries of the information had a very important role. For example, the media, the journalists, was the way that you use to connect with the general public. But this is an important role, and it's necessary to maintain this contact to explain our statistics by the media. But the future has changed. For example, the use of artificial intelligence, our effort is perhaps not necessary to create a very beautiful web page in our website. Perhaps the most important role is to try to make information, metadata for machines. Perhaps it's the future of our role, to create content for the machines, not to create a very beautiful dashboard or very interactive graphs, because in the future, the public, general public, will use this artificial intelligence chatbot to collect the information. And it's necessary to base good metadata, good information, explanation, that this machine could interpret correctly the information. Okay.
Alberto, may I add something?
Yes.
Yeah, regarding this question of how to be close to our audiences, how to communicate, I think it's very important also, we discussed it yesterday, to listen our audiences. For instance, in Chile, we have, well, you know, we are a very long country with different heterogeneity in the geography. In the north, we have the mining. In the middle in the center, we have the agriculture. And in the south, we have fishery and forestry. And then we have a lot of demand from the regions to have their own indicator. And it's very important to them, and we are lucky that they are asking us instead of having from other sources. So we have to listen to them, and so it's our priority now, this year and the years ahead, I think, to cover this demand. And on the other hand, we at the central bank, we also are very lucky because we have very rich information from our internal revenue service. We have all the sales, weekly sales, purchases from the final consumer, sales between business, and it's very, very rich. We can combine with other databases. So many researchers from outside the bank always said, why will you have that and you can share with us? And we cannot share with them because the Internal Revenue Service gave just for us, for our function and purposes. So the way we have found to share this information with the researcher is first we have this experimental indicator, experimental statistic, when we can publish aggregate results. So we have publishing sales by sector, sales by region, sales inter-region, or sales by size of companies. So that's one part of the way that we are using now. And the other is to have a call for projects for research, to having analysts from the bank researching with people from outside the bank, from academy, and then also it's a pilot, but I think it has been very, very positive because at least they feel that they can have access to the data, not to the microdata. We can share with them aggregate results, but they can have the final study or research. So I think it's really important to listen, not only to communicate. Sometimes we communicate, but don't realize that probably the people is needing something else.
Gloria, a follow-up question. Okay, there is a trade-off between data that address to a specific concern like forestry in the south of Chile and the quality of the data. In one sense, you know, we know that if we try to be very precise or very have a very data close to real time to say, you know, the probability of making a mistake or the precision of statistics is going to be low. I think the best example, or a good example is the following. Here in Chile, we publish basically GDP every month. It's not GDP, but people think it's GDP, but it's activity for the whole economy, not just for one sector, not just sales. It's called IMASEC, right? And we know that it's very imprecise measure of activity. But every time, every month, the Ministry of Finance has to explain why the economy last month grew 10 basis points less than expectations. And we know that the question is a little bit stupid because we know that the indicator is very imprecise, so it's just impossible to explain that. But well, we keep publishing this, which is very unusual, I think, if you compare with other countries, because, well, that's legacy. But on the other hand, now today we have a lot of data. So we have the capability to publish very precise indicators like sales of whatever in whatever region. Right. So beside the legal problems with the, with the confidentiality problem, forget that, there is a statistical problem that how to communicate that, your statistics are not the true, but just approximation of the true. So, how do you see this trade-off?
Well, I think that is it's a very relevant question, because statisticians have this trade-off between quality and timeliness. So you have to live with both. You have to try to separate. In fact, we have a separate department on experimental statistics, and we have the formal one on national account and all of that. So that is a very important issue, and to explain the people that is not the same. But you have both demands. You have robust, because we need to compare statistics with other countries. Investors will want to know how is Chile developing, how is Chile advancing, etc. And at the same time, we need to fulfill the need for rapid decision. On pandemic, we need more timely indicator, and you have to solve that demand. So I think it's important to explain and to separate. And also, when we publish IMASEC, we always say it's preliminary, very preliminary, and then we have quarterly GDP. And that is a more important one, because it's more robust, obviously, and we try to separate and explain in the minutes. When we publish that, we always say preliminary. So that's one challenge we have. And also, like we talked yesterday, and Remigio was saying, oh, we don't like revision, because you always make revision and then you change everything. Again, we have a calendar, we have our revision policy, and it's important because it's more robust when you have more sources, more information. It's part of the statistical process. People sometimes now with everything is on time, and everybody wants on-time information and online. So you have to say, yeah, okay, but still this is a proxy. It's a proxy of activity. IMASEC, it has a lot of sales. It's not a real concept of production, So we have a lot of assumptions under IMASEC. So I think it's a challenge to explain, but we can do it. The other day we had to explain the press, the media, for our regional GDP, and they were asking quarter GDP. They misunderstand something, so we have to have a talk and explain them, because then they produce or disseminate our data. So we need that they understand what we are doing. So I think it is part of our challenges, but I think we can do it.
Yeah, to add that, it's important to be very transparent about the revisions. Just publish the revisions that you made the last 10, 20 years. So the first estimate, the second one, the third, and just make tables. The OECD has a great graph for many countries already. And if you have that available, and you can even link that in your press release, then you can say, okay, this is experimental, or this is preliminary. Because I completely agree with Gloria. Sometimes timely data is very relevant and very important, and then the accuracy might be a little bit less. And then you have the definite data 3 or 4 years later. It's very accurate, but not very relevant anymore. So timeliness is a part of quality. And what I think is good practice is to link to this table of revision, so all the users can see, what does that mean? I mean, experimental is just a term, right? But if you link to the table of revisions, they can see how much it changed, and you can even explain why it changed. And I think the OECD, you still have that, Jorrit, right? The revision. So they still have that, and that's good practice.
Thank you.
Okay, and only this very tricky question that you made about how communicate the uncertainty of our work. And yesterday, in the Sanjeev presentation, initiative the possibility to introduce more information in our output. No? For example, I'm thinking in this specific case of the Chile economy, the possibility not to produce the central point of our estimation, to release the information of the band of our estimation, no? How to manage or calibrate the uncertainty of the figures, and the Minister of Economy has more information to evaluate how it's possible to make the assessment about the evolution of the month, no? And perhaps to introduce not only a single figure, to introduce the context of this figure and provide as a more transparent way what is the quality of our data, with the advance of the data, of preliminary data, and incorporate more information than only a single figure. Okay.
that's interesting because we move in the other direction. We decided to publish sectoral in a second. So it's less precise, but at least allow you to understand if our indicator moves because of something happening in the mining sector or something happening in the services sector. But I think that at some point we are giving a sense of precision that we could measure things that we actually cannot. But well, anyway, let me move to the third topic, which is collaboration and governance. Everybody, everywhere, said that collaboration is critical. But we have to recognize that it's also hard because of silos, because of incompatibility across systems, because there's no clear governance. So let me stay with Luis Angel and ask you, what are, in your view, the biggest barriers to interoperability and data sharing across institutions?
It's a tricky question again. No? What is the problem to the sharing, data sharing, no? In between institutions? I think that the typical answer to this question is the legal framework. It's a big barrier and it's not possible. But sometimes it's not the truly answer. I think that very often behind of this answer there is not a strong commitment from the institution to share data. We usually work as silos. This is my data. I am the owner of this information, and it's not possible to share because I lose the capability to introduce correction or modification. There is a fear to share the data. But I think that this approach is not fruitful. It is necessary to modify completely this mood, this approach. And here is very important the role of the international institutions. I am thinking, for example, the important initiative inside of the G20 Data Gap Initiative, the initiative for data sharing. The possibility of the international organization could give advice how to manage the data sharing between institutions, but not only between the statistical institution. The possibility to share data with the researchers, with the private companies. For example, in the case of Europe, there is a very important project, the European data space, where is the possibility to share information with the public, with the private companies. And here, again, the role of the statistical offices is very important. As input, providing our experiences, our background in methodology, in the use of indicators, in the use of the classification, but in the possibility to extract the output of this information, this data space, to produce new statistics. I think that is very important in this moment because perhaps the collaboration between, not only between public institutions, the collaboration with private companies in this moment, perhaps in the private side of the economy, there are more data than in the public sector. No? And for the companies, the data in this moment is a strategic asset for them. And we have to find a collaboration between the private and the public institution to maximize the value of the data. The barriers are the commitment of the institution, and I think that is necessary the collaboration with the international organization to try to resolve this vicious circle and the use of the problem of legal to not share the data. It's necessary to cut this circle. I'm thinking of a different way.
Thank you. Bert, at the IMF, you not only have to coordinate different institutions, you have to coordinate different countries, different institutions within countries, and I guess also to coordinate with other multilateral organizations. So your thought on this issue of where are the main barriers to interoperability and information sharing?
Yeah, let me start. It's so important to be able to share and access data. Gloria gave this example of all this wonderful microdata that you have in the Banco de Chile, and all well organized, and so much great work can be done. And we need to find ways to have researchers doing very valuable public good research to access that. Also internationally, a big issue in interpreting our balance of payments data are the asymmetries between current accounts, between FDI statistics, between trade data. And well, it's so sharing data between central banks, between national statistical institutes, between international organizations and central banks is so incredibly important. And an example where Europe was very successful is in trading goods. Every country in Europe, they collected goods. What are the exports to every other country and imports from every other country? And they were all inconsistent. And then there was a solution found, and it took 10 years, something like that. But in the end, well, there was a way that the data could be compared. So the data, the exports from the Netherlands to Germany can be compared to the imports from Germany from the Netherlands on the micro level basis, on the company basis. And that really helps improve that data. So this is the way to go, but it's very slow and it's difficult, and there are legal issues, confidentiality issues, but it's always, they are real, they're there, but if there's a will, is the leadership to try to resolve it, you can go far. And Luis mentioned the G20 Data Gaps Initiative. This is the Ministries of Finance and Central Bank Governors of the G20. They asked, well, us, the BIS, the World Bank, together with the G20 OECD, with the G20 ECB, G20 economies to solve a lot of data gaps. And two of the recommendations are on this, so data access and data sharing. And what we're doing is bring together all the experiences, making maturity assessment. So every country will fill that in. It's like a spider. It's legal, it's leadership, it's technical, it's a few other things. And if you have that all, if a country can benchmark to each other, you share best practices. So there are real obstacles in all these areas: technical, confidentiality, privacy. But things can be done. Sometimes it takes a long time, but the whole so-called SIMSTAT system now in Europe is an example. Of course, they have this legal foundation that makes things a little bit easier. But yeah, this is what we're doing.
Thank you. Gloria, at the Central Bank of Chile, we have made incredible advances in interconnecting databases across that are in different government institutions. So we're not part of the government, but we have been critical in connecting all this information that was diffused across a government agency. But this has been a very long process. So what did you learn from this? Especially in what is relevant to make this progress more sustainable on time?
Well, as I said before, we depend a lot of many other institutions, governmental institutions, from having access to data. We have many agreements with them, and we are also have committed to follow all the statements made in the agreement. For instance, with IRS, we have to use only for our purposes the data. We cannot share with anybody else. At the same time, with other, we always have privacy and confidentiality, obviously. So we, in a certain way, we have been at the central bank, like a data center from the government. We would like also that our INE make that function, but in a certain way, we at the central bank are creating this possibility of combining different different databases and only sharing with this strict condition that I mentioned before. But I still think that is a very good advance. We are talking with the people from the Comisión Mercado Financiero. Her president was here in the morning, and we are trying to have with them also a data repository on monetary and financial indicators, and in order that we can share with them and not duplicate asking the same to the companies, to the banks. So this is a very important project that we have for this year and the years ahead, because it's a long-term work. But still, I think that it's important that we share more and more the analysis, the data with others, because it's unfair for the rest that they don't have access to this. We have the resources to do it, the people that is dedicated to that. So we feel that it's important as a public servant, a civil servant that we are, to also have this role, at least while the INE is not going to do that, well, someone has to do it. So we are working slowly on getting for that and sharing with others all the very rich information that we can have now in Chile, because electronic, the digitalization has provided many governmental services are having all digital, all the transactions digitalized. So we have access to that, and it's important that we share as a public good.
Thank you, Gloria. Legal aspects are critical. The willingness to share, of course, is critical, but also standards and technology, because to share information easily, have the same standards and compatible technology is very important. So, Bruno, what do you think is the role of multilateral institutions, and in particular the BIS and the IFC, in helping the world to converge to standards and technology that are compatible?
Difficult question. But I would start by saying, like you said, with Angel, first we should try to do as much as we can to support data sharing. So at the BIS, we have done this. Two examples. One is we think that we can do better data by sharing the data. The international banking statistics that we collect, just to clarify, we are able to reproduce data that are not on a residency-based statistics, or residency basis, but on a nationality basis. So we are able to publish data on the banking systems by nationality. For this, you need to compute data from the US with the European countries to reconstruct something that is not by residency, but by nationality. So you need to share data. So it's very useful. If you don't share data, as we do at the BIS, you don't have the right indicators. We also need to share data for financial supervisors. So that's what we try to do with the global systemic banks. It's very important that regulators or supervisors in Europe have access to information on global systemic banks located outside of Europe. So we try to do this, but it's highly complex. It takes a lot of time. We initiated this after the great financial crisis, and still the information is not widely shared, it's really restricted. So my point is that sharing data is very important, but it's not the only solution. It's also important to share methodologies. It's also important to share metadata, for example, not information on corporate groups, but simply how the structure of these corporate groups, if you cannot share the information, or global banks, or I mentioned IT codes, or I mentioned also governance issues. So what the IFC, why the IFC has been acting in this area is that we think that collaboration among central banks can improve this sharing of information. So we have developed a knowledge center. This was pushed by the Central Bank of Chile and also the Reserve Bank of South Africa, and it has been quite successful to share information that is not just data, but and on this we saw that there's a lot of appetite to share information on what should be the adequate governance of AI and data, what are the trade-offs in terms of IT issues, People don't want to discuss these issues openly. They want to discuss among central banks and also on the more traditional data management issues. So on central banks, we are doing our best to improve this collaboration. But looking ahead, I really think that more needs to be done, not just among central banks, but between international organizations, national statistical offices, and central banks. And I was referring to the current work that NSOs are doing with the UN, and I think we are very supportive of that. I see 4 areas. One is developing the curator role of national officials, bodies, to ensure that the data used by society are relevant and are wisely used. The second point is on the global data infrastructure. SDMX or standards, also methodological standards like the SNA, also registers, also identifiers. The third point is on the data management processes. And the last thing, which is not easy, is user literacy, so to ensure that people understand the data and the tools. And so for all these 4 points, I think that we need international collaboration, and still it has to be developed.
For this point, I totally agree, Bruno, again with you. Only to stress 2 points related to the data sharing. The key role of the identifiers. I think that is the pending matter of the how to manage properly the microdata. The use of the universal identifier could be the solution for a lot of problems for our lives. And the second is that the limit of data sharing is very common to the approach to this problem in a national perspective. No? The possibility to data sharing between the national statistical offices, between central bank, national statistical institute. But nowadays, the economic problems are cross-border. It's global, and the examples of the possibility to share data between countries, between institutions globally are very few. And it's necessary to increase the possibility to the adoption of the new rules, the data sharings in terms of internationally. No? To try, for example, the discrepancies in the international trade. It's not possible to understand how it's not possible to share the data, microdata, but in other aspects, no? For example, internationally, financial aspects of the markets, the different topics, the possibility to share, not nationally, even internationally. Okay.
Thank you very much, Luis Angel. And thank you all of you. Now we turn to the audience. We have 17 minutes for Q&A. So please raise your hand and mention your name and institution before the question.
Remigio Echeverría from the European Central Bank. I have first a comment. I think was very interesting, this debate about the monthly GDP indicator that you were mentioning. I don't know, maybe my experience with users, and it was mentioned, maybe the solution is to explain more what it is. Well, I have the experience that when you put a graph with a very big footnote, my users never read the footnote, so only use the data and that's it. So I would say that don't invest on that, just decide whether the pros and cons of publishing the data with all the limitations and the criticisms that you will receive is worth it, or otherwise stop publishing. But don't dream that communication will make it the trick, I think, or at least that's my modest experience with exactly having a footnote which is larger than the number, but then the people just get the number. And if you don't give the number, they will get it from Bloomberg, who will, with the series, make an estimate, and then will buy it from Harvard Analytics or Bloomberg. So anyway, that's a very difficult problem, which leads me a bit to one of the questions that was regarding communication, and you all intervene about this issue of communication. And of course, in communication, I think key is the audience. You only communicate for a certain audience. And here I sometimes, and maybe a question is a bit provocative, but I see differences. Differences when we speak about statisticians, and we are all statisticians, I'm also a statistician, but statisticians in a statistical office and statisticians in a central bank, for me, are subject to very different audiences. And this makes, for me, a key difference, and I'm not sure if this is properly reflected when we put all us under the statistical profession. So the statistical profession means we have to do the things professionally, according to certain criteria and so on. But of course, our audiences are very different. So I think that for NSIs, I think the audience is the general public, the parliament, the government. They are scrutinized, and the program is approved by the parliament, what they have to do every year, and they are liable to the public. The communication to the public is very different than in a central bank. Who is my user in my central bank, in the European Central Bank as Deputy Director General of Statistics? I have only one user, and this user is Ms. Lagarde. I do whatever Ms. Lagarde wants me to do. That's my program. And that's the only audience. That's the only person that really has to understand all what I do. And that all what I do, she must understand and she must be happy with. Whether the public then understands better or worse the numbers that as a byproduct, I then decide to put in my website, it's another problem, or is of a secondary importance. So I think there are certain differences. So in that respect, I think, and I don't know what you think about that, maybe you can also then share with me your views, or whether you see it's the same or different. I agree with Gloria. In communicating in a central bank statistics, it's about listening. It's not about communicating the numbers. It's about listening what the users want. Your stakeholders are the people in the monetary policy area, what they need. And if you tell them, well, very interesting, but this I don't do because I'm implementing now whatever the balance of payments is in the manual, but I know you need other data, but okay, but I communicate you very well my BOP numbers that you don't ask for them, but still are very good, I promise. You will become irrelevant in the central bank. You will not get the resources. So my only possibility to double the size of my department is not to produce very nice dashboard for the people outside the streets. It's that Ms. Lagarde thinks that what I will deliver is exactly what she needs in order to make better monetary policy. Otherwise, then I get resources. If she's not convinced, I don't get resources. So I will not invest a lot in dashboards for the external people. And I think sometimes maybe this is a bit forgotten, but maybe you have different views I would like to hear. Yes.
Well, I agree with you that our
the board is the most important.
Of course.
And I agree with you too.
Totally agree. But at the same time, we at the central bank has what we call the Chinese wall. When we have the GDP in the statistics, and we also have people from monetary policy, and they have their forecastings and all of that, and it's a very separate work. So, and also we have people from the private sector, from the banks, from general public. So it's right, we have to fulfill all their demands. It's more hard, but I think we are trying to do it. And when you say, no, don't put footnotes, I agree, nobody reads footnotes. So what we have done in last time is using blogs to explain some specific issues, technical issues, in very easy way. So we had this problem with the seasonal adjustment, and when we had this more day in February, and then the last year we didn't have it one day. So when we compare annually, because you have this different calendar effect, so we explain the calendar effect in a blog, and many people read it, and then when the figure arises, everybody talk, oh no, it's because we have one day less, and so that explanation why the IMASEC is, growth less. So I think that's another way to, and using also the social media, the press, everything to communicate specific issues, not general thing. And in another sense, also we are covering, for instance, we have this lecture with a student of economics explaining how to make the macroeconomic, the national account, the balance of payment, and we have this lecture of from 6 or 7, 8 sessions, and we go to universities and show them more detail how we calculate, how we done our statistics. It's a different audience, but still important, because they're the future economy, the future people in the market that are going to make forecasting of our GDP. So it's more complex work, but also it's more funny because you have many, many different audiences that you have to compile.
Yeah, I will add something, because I kind of disagree with your view. Because even from the point of view of monetary policy, of course, the board needs information, that is good, information that you can trust. So yeah, for sure we are important stakeholders of Floria's unit. But we also need people to understand the data in order to monetary policy be effective. If people don't understand the data, it doesn't matter if you set the interest rate correctly or incorrectly, you are not going to have, you're not going to get the right impact on the economy. So communication, good communication of data is critical also for monetary policy. Not only because people use that data for other purpose different from the objective of the central bank. So yeah, people are also an important stakeholder in that respect. Bruno.
Yeah, I would also challenge a little bit, Remigio, what you said, because I think our counterparts in the National Statistical Offices, they may misunderstand what you were saying. I think it's very important to say that central banks are strange animals. They are producers and users of statistics. And the role of official producers has to be separated from the role of providing information to policymakers. And I think central banks are doing this very well. One example is that the BIS, when we do a statistical release, we do this independently from the management, the top management of the BIS. When we produce a policy notes, of course, the management of the BIS is involved in the drafting of the recommendation. So I think it's delicate. It's not easy to do because it's perhaps easier for a national statistical office where they have only one mandate. But it's very important to distinguish between these two very important mandates. And I agree with what you said, not least because you are the chair of the AFC. But
there is a lot of conflict of interest in this panel.
Yeah. But the credibility of the data you produce is a key element supporting the effectiveness of the central bank policies. So,
thank you, Bruno. Sorry.
I would like to add a little thing. Thank you, Remy, for your question and for your provocative way to explain what is the role of in our lives. No? I agree with you that President Lagarde is a very relevant user of our data, but let me introduce a little limitation in your approach about this. I think that it's very important to distinguish clearly what is the labor of statisticians, statistics work, and the work of a cabinet. I think that it's important that the perception of the general public, our work, is under the umbrella of the principle of the quality of the data, and we follow the principle of the equal access for all users. President Lagarde is very important when we produce the data, but we have a methodology, we have a commitment in terms of the quality and the explainability of the data that is not only for President Lagarde, it's for all the users that we have in our world. And I think that this is a very gray area, what is the limit of our task. But it's important to keep in mind that we have to follow a general framework in terms of the equal common access for everybody. because this is a very important element of the credibility of our independence. We are not only working for President Lagarde, we are working for all European citizens. We want to follow the framework of the quality of the statistics, but I agree with you that is very relevant of the point of view of President Lagarde. Okay.
The issue of priorities is very important. It's very important where you put the most energy, for example, in your communication, in your resources, in the data that you are working on. That makes a difference. And of course, the question that Gloria was saying, I fully understand. I mean, for example, I would not like to compute GDP. I would not like to compute inflation in the ECB because, of course, then it's for others to explain this to the general public, and then I take my decisions on information that others produce, and others have the responsibility, as Alberto was saying, to explain whether this is good and whether then my decision of decreasing rates is justified because of how inflation is moving, and I have nothing to do with that. It's for others to explain. But when then you look internally, you have to, in my view, be very much aware. I mean, the problem I try to see is that very often, I have seen that in my case, in the central bank, you get a request from a department to say, it would be very helpful if you would do X for us, because this is crucial for helping us to monitor. And then says, oh, this is not a statistic, or this, but the manual doesn't fit, or whatever else. And the people say, thank you very much, and you become irrelevant in your own institution. So then you can still do very nice statistical principles, and you produce the aggregate according to whatever. But if the people was saying, you need to degranularize this, or to provide me the information at 10 days, maybe partial information, which is not yet the standard that you will communicate then widely to the public or whatever, then you have to evaluate whether you become a perfect statistician and perfectly relevant to the institution in which you're working or for which you're working for. And I think this trade-off, sometimes we have to be a bit more aware on that.
For sure, it's relevant. We still have a couple of minutes for another question. So raise your hand here.
Yeah, thank you. Fernando Lemos, Central Bank of Brazil, Banco Central do Brasil. So it's just a comment, and I think this stemming from what Fernando presented and what Gloria mentioned. I think we have to have the concern of not trying to see AI as a solution, looking for a problem to solve. If we have the solution already, and coming from central banks, I mean, a large portion of what we do are standardized data that have used structured frameworks, and for which we have the solution already. So I think that there might be an issue that we might divert our attention from what we already do quite well to trying to implement new tools. Remember big data 6 or 7 years ago? A lot of people are still looking for a problem for that solution. And not to say that the innovations aren't very welcome, new types of statistics, but this is something that I think we should pay attention to. And this goes to actually my question. Do you have the concern that AI and all that it offers or seems to offer might divert us from tackling basic problems that we still have? Talking about asymmetries, something that I've been involved with is asymmetries in foreign direct investment. If you look at the IMF CDIS data, we have basic asymmetries. I mean, asymmetries in a very basic data set, which is foreign direct investment, that we've been trying to solve for years. Don't you have a concern that your staff, your teams might divert their attention, given the thinking that maybe AI will be the panacea, will help them solve it without, listen, we have basic problems that we have other tools that can help solve, and AI is not going to solve this for us?
Yeah, good question, Fernando. At the IMF, by the way, Mrs. Lagarde was at the IMF before, we have about 600 missions every year. We go to countries all over the world. The vast majority of these missions, statistical missions, are about getting the base year right, getting the expenditure side of national accounts right, getting your monetary financial statistics in order. So the VAST is just what you would call bread and butter normal statistics. And this will stay. We will have these regular statistical issues, and we need to have good business registers. So I don't think this big data, I said it yesterday, I say it again, will replace our normal statistics. Having said that, there's a reason to go into that, not to replace our work, but there is a demand for quicker statistics. If we keep on publishing our data on GDP so late, then other information will show up, and it has to be used to decide on economic growth and policies. There's a need for granular information on what's happening to the job market. There's a need to have more elaborated sentiment indicators to quickly gauge what's going. And if we don't do it in a controlled way, in an official way, then this information will just abound, and there will be a less important evidence base for decision making. So no, big data will not take away the core problems, and we have established, as you know, this specific task force on asymmetries of FDI, and this is very basic work. We're looking into data sharing, of course, and there it can help. I mean, the new encryption technology, homomorphic encryption, etc., may help to be able to especially secure multi-party computation, to see what are the differences from, and so these new techniques may help, but the problems remain a little bit the same. And on the generative AI, yeah, we're just seeing what it can do. I just showed you in the break what this talk to the manuals did. We all agree this is a great achievement. So it will really help compiling. It will really help making the application easier, especially for the new BPM and SNA. There's some very difficult things in the new BPM and the SNA, evaluating data, the value of non-renewable energy resources. How are we going to do that? If big data can be an answer to that, well, it would be great. And we see big data in production for the GDP nowcasting. We have it in production for the Port Watch, so there are real time implementations that are actually used as official statistics and official decision making, but it does not replace traditional statistics making. So anyone who walks out the room that GDP, current account balance, reserve statistics are not important anymore, they are. And a lot of that will be made by traditional source, but they can add and they can really complement what we already have.
Thank you very much. We ran out of time. It was a very interesting, big, beautiful panel. A big, beautiful panel. So please join me. Very well-deserved applause. Now we will finish the conference with the closing remarks by Gloria.
Dear colleagues and friends, as we conclude the 6th Statistics Conference, The Power of Data for a Smart World, I want to express my sincere gratitude to each of you for your presence, your insights, and your commitment to advancing the role of data in shaping our future. Over the past 2 days, we have explored how data, when used responsibly and innovatively, can empower better decision-making, foster transparency, and strengthen public trust. We've seen how institutions across the world are embracing new technologies, particularly artificial intelligence, to enhance the quality, timeliness, and relevance of the statistics we produce. In this very special year, as we celebrated the centennial of our institution, it was a true honor on behalf of the Central Bank of Chile to host this important gathering and to welcome such a distinguished group of professionals committed to developing better statistics for a smarter, more inclusive, and more resilient world. We've discussed the emergence of new indicators, the integration of microdata, the use of geospatial tools, and distributional national accounts to enrich our understanding of economic and social phenomena. These innovations are not merely technical, they are transformative, enabling us to respond to complex challenges. A recurring theme during the conference has been the importance of listening to our users, to society, and to each other. Whether through improved communication strategies, audience engagement, or ethical consideration in data governance, we are reminded that statistics are just not numbers. They are powerful tools for dialogue and understanding. As AI becomes more embedded in our work, we must remain vigilant about issues such as privacy, misinformation, and the ethical use of data. Our final panel emphasized the need for collaboration, shared standards, and a renewed commitment to quality and integrity. The role of international organizations is essential in addressing these challenges and fostering broad collaboration. All of these insights aim to ensure that we can continue to deliver timely, reliable, and comprehensive statistics. I would like to thank our distinguished speakers, moderators, and panelists from central banks, international organizations, academia, and national statistic offices who generously share their knowledge and experiences. Your contributions have made this conference a rich and inspiring experience. Before closing, I extend my sincere gratitude to the bank's board of directors for their support, and to all presenters, panelists, and participants, both in person and online, who joined us from approximately 25 countries. Finally, I want to express my deepest gratitude to the organizing team behind every detail of this conference. Patricia Medrano, Helen Parker, Antonia Silva, Vania Vargas, Romina Villarroel, Daphne Gilov, Maria Jose Reyes, Constanza Martelli, and Graciela Roman. Thank you very much, and I look forward to see you in our next conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Please remember to answer the brief survey with the QRs displayed on the screen. And for those of you who have translation equipment, please remember to return them outside. Thank you.